All right, let's get started. It's good to see that people have taken the time to come here and join us. I know it is very difficult after already 2 days with a lot of announcements that are happening, but glad to see at least a number of people turning up, and hopefully people will listen to the podcast as well at a later stage. So let me introduce myself first. So I'm Roel Schrijn from Shell. I'm the enterprise portfolio manager looking after our data and AI capabilities and our data analytics platforms. And one of the things what I want to discuss here is on how we have to help HR in really achieving a self-service model for their HR data so that we can power progress and with the right people at the right place at the right moment. From an agenda perspective, a few things that I want to cover. It's about protecting, on how we're protecting people data. We will look a little bit at our solution, how we've built our data platform, how it is being used by our businesses, and also specifically zooming in on what we have done with Immuta. Also, we will cover a little bit what is next and where we are working on and what we see coming as well. After my presentation, Mo from Immuta will take it over. We'll zoom in a little bit more on the Immuta technology as well. So, country note, make a picture of this because this is very important. But it is a forward-looking statement, so everything what I say, you know, don't use it in your decisions to buy any shares. Yeah, look broader than that. Also, we will talk about a number of other companies that you might see that we use in our ecosystems. We took our own decisions. You need to make your own decision what you do, so don't see that as a recommendation from Shell. So, what we really wanted to do is really bring all data together in more or less in a single platform, yeah, where it easily is to access the data, yeah, to consume the data, and start getting insights into the data. And especially if you talk about HR and you talk about sensitive data. So that is also an aspect where we will be looking into, but we also look to the broader aspect on how we really bring data into the platform. If you look at some of the challenges that we had with the HR data, it is really all about the size of the number of people we have. We have 80,000 people. We have around 100 countries. A lot of the personal data, personal identifiable data is part of legislation. So GDPR, for example, in Europe, but other countries have other rules around personal identifiable data as well. So what we really wanted to do is move to a very self-service model for all the HR advisors, talent advisors, recruiters, so that they have the information at their fingertips. But before we zoom in what we effectively have done for HR, let's have a look at our enterprise data platform and our enterprise data services. So what you see is actually we have built a complete ecosystem that is centered around the Databricks lakehouse. And we have at one end the data creators, that is where data is being created and how we can bring data into the platform. The second part is all about data consumers. How can we consume the data? And we have a set of services there as well. And what we actually make sure that all those things seamlessly integrate in each other. But they also can be used standalone. So you see quite a number of technologies we use. We have our enterprise data catalog looking at the data consumer side. We have, of course, Immuta there for the data access side and for the policy-based access. We clearly see some of the machine learning capabilities that we have, some of the Azure tools as well. But also on how we bring the data into the platform, we see different methodologies on how people can bring in the data into our platform. So we have built this whole ecosystem, and we actually started our journey already 8 years ago with Databricks. Yeah, so we have already a very long journey on what we have done with Databricks. And that evolved 8 years ago, where we started very simply with a data lake and some Spark clusters to do some data transformation, and from there we have been growing the environment. If you look at our current architecture, and we actually in what we call version 2 of our data and analytics platforms, what we call the enterprise data platform, is actually a complete data mesh architecture. So we have created data domains aligned with our business sectors. So we have 26 different business sectors, and we have made sure for every business sector is a data domain where they can bring in the data into their environment. If you look at some of the statistics, we have around 1,100 workspaces today, so it's really a sizable environment. I think we have around 4 million DBUs that we process and that we leverage on a monthly basis. And what you also see, we leverage Unity Catalog, but we don't use Unity Catalog on all our environments. We had our DNA platform, that's the first version of our platform, And when some of the new technologies became available, like Unity Catalog and some of the other things, we realized that the architecture was not the fit for the future anymore. And that is where we started our EDP platform. So if you look at today, we have around 100 business applications on top of our EDP platform and around 300 on our DNA platform. And some of those are now migrating over to our EDP platform because that brings all the latest capabilities from Databricks. So a lot of the announcements you have here today, they can start using that tomorrow, those users that are running on our EDP platform. The whole idea why we have actually built this platform is what we saw happening in Shell is that people have a lot of data silos in Shell where data is locked in and not available for others. So what we really wanted to make sure is that we can open up those data silos, bring all the data together, and then start reporting, analyzing the data, and start creating the value of data. Because what we realized as a company is that data is the new oil, because it gives you the insight in how we do as a company. So this is the current architecture that we have here. We have as the center, of course, Databricks with the lakehouse. We have as the data access layer, we use Immuta. Of course, on the data consumer side, there are a lot of things that are actually consuming our data. So this is a little bit about our enterprise data platform and a bit of the history where we are coming from. If you start looking what we have done for HR is the HR had a similar problem that we see a lot of other businesses as well. They have Workday data, they have data in Salesforce, they have data in spreadsheets, they have data in other systems. And for an HR advisor, it was very difficult to get access to that data because then they first go to one system, then they need to go to another system, then they need to download it in a spreadsheet, then they need to manipulate it, and then we can work further. And what we actually see with Shell as a changing organization, we adapt always on how the market conditions are, on how some things are evolving. The organizations continue to change. So for an HR advisor, it's very important to have that information at your fingertips, so that you really know where the talent is. Make sure the talent is at the right moment, at the right place. If you recruit people, that you have the processes and easily access to see who's applying for the roles and that you can do the selection as well. The biggest challenge where we did run into when we started onboarding HR to our enterprise data platform is that they came with quite a lot of additional requirements and controls to be in place because we talk about personal identifiable data. And what we realized during the journey is that we actually, with the current ways and the technologies we had at that moment of time, we could not fulfill their requirements because we could not give that granular access for the HR advisor to only see the data where they are truly accountable for and that they are allowed to see. That is where GDPR and some of the other legislation comes into place, that they only can see that data where they're truly accountable for. So what we did is that we saw that with the current tools and the processes we had in place, we could not fulfill this gap. We started looking at the marketplace, and that is where we started partnering with Immuta to help us to provide that granular access. If you see what a bit of the vision was from our HR advisors, that they said, we want to keep it actually very simple. We want to actually make sure that, you're part of the EDS platform, you're part of the group of HR, and then you start looking at some of the functions you have in HR. Then you have, of course, two sets of data. You have just data that we classify as internal, in principle, could be seen by everybody in the HR team. But then you have more confidential type of data or personal identifiable data, and that should only specifically to the person that can access it and should see it. And when we tried to build this with the airbag and the role-based access, we could do this, but it's a lot of manual work. Because what actually happened is that you need to get first your users from Active Directory, then you need to get some Workday data to understand their location, and you need to bring that together. And there was actually no way to do that in an automated way. So what needed to happen is that those security groups that are there for role-based access were actually created manually. And that are not hundreds, but that are thousands of groups that need to be created to make sure that depending on the location and HR advisory is what data you can see. And here is where policy-based access come in. And that is where we're going to see also a little bit the benefit of the ecosystem we had. So at one end, we capture the data from out of Active Directory, so we at least understand the user. Then we get the data from Workday that give a lot more attributes like location and like some of the other attributes. But then also you need to look at the data. And if you look at the data, you need to understand the classification of the data, so you need to get the metadata of the data as well. And that is actually the beauty of what we have done with policy-based access together with Immuta, is that we can bring all those attributes together and actually starting creating a policy that you can apply on the data. That means that all the manual work after you have created those policies is completely gone. Yeah, you can fully automate the process as well. So that means if an HR advisor is getting another role, he has no access anymore to the data. If an HR advisor is moving from one country to another country, he has not access anymore to the data in the old country, but he has automatically the access in the new country. So that is really the benefit of policy-based access control. We also see this could be applicable in some other environments where we see more regulation. You can think about some of the financing data that could be there, but you can also look at commercial sensitive data as well, where we really can protect that data on a very granular level, and only people that are allowed to see the data can see the data. If you now look at some of the benefits that have brought that to us. So we started with 80,000 users that we have there. We have 8,500 policies, and we really could reduce that to few policies that we have there. So in principle, we can everything do now with 16 Immuta policies, which of course gives a very good benefit for our customers and makes it very simple. The other benefits that we got out of this, because of the full automation that is in place, but also the full traceability of what is happening, is from a business point of view, what does it mean for HR? If you look from an HR perspective, we clearly saw that we could reduce the number of FTEs that were working on maintaining the airbag roles in the past. So we had around 2 FTE that were only updating those roles on a continuous basis. But the biggest benefit, if you start looking in bringing Immuta together with Databricks and bringing all the data in, is actually for the HR advisor itself. So we came from an environment where it to process the data, it took 10 days. If we wanted to bring in manual data, it took another 5 days. If we were running a report, we could only refresh it every 3 days. And now it is all automatically. So you have now, as an HR advisor, or as a talent advisor, or as a recruiter, you have always the latest data at your fingertips. So we have fully automated that process. We have taken a lot of the manual work that was being done out of the way. If we look overall, the benefits that we see from our enterprise data platform is really a lot of reductions and savings that we can do. So this is not only looking at HR, but really across our platform, what we do together with Databricks and one with Immuta, and this is some of the key benefits and the quantitative benefits that we clearly see. So it's clearly a reduction in the cost that are there, and really optimize the solution. So what are we going to do in the future, and where are we looking at in the future as well, and what are some of the next steps that we are exploring? So we see clearly the rise of data products, and data products are really getting a momentum now, and also we see that starting now within Shell as well, where you have a defined set of data that you want to make as a reusable data set, that of course a clear owner, has a life cycle management across it, but also what you want to make sure that A, you can find those data products very easily, but also get very easy access to it. And that is the next step where we are now working on, is to automate the workflow to get automated access to a data product. So what is actually happening, if you as a user and you look at our enterprise data catalog, you can see those data products. You say, hey, I want to have access to the data product. It will kick off a workflow in our enterprise data catalog. It will make sure that the data owner, or the owner of the data product, will approve it. And then automatically it will go to Immuta, that user will be applied to the policies, it gets applied to the data set, and then automatically the user is granted access to the data product. So it's a completely automated workflow. So there is no manual person in between that gives you access to that set of data. It is fully automated. And that's the next big benefit we're going to see. Now, if you see, we talk here a lot about people that get access to data, but I think the big next step is not only people that get access to data, and I think we have all heard a lot about agentic AI and agents, and I think that is where the next step is come. How are you going to manage with all those agents, which agents get access to what data? And that is also where we think where maybe the next steps could be in integrating this as well. So clearly, continue to looking ahead as well. So, just to summarize it is where we really have moved to is to self-service analytics. Yeah, so really our HR advisors can now really look at the data, have no need to talk to IT anymore or to provide access to it. It is all automated. And of course, this is not only applicable for HR, yeah, but also for other customers and other business use cases that we have running on top of Dell. We have achieved that as well. And of course, then we start looking at the data products, yeah, the data product ownership, and leveraging data products in the future as well. So, just to summarize it, yeah, so before we started this journey with HR, you know, even our HR advisors didn't know all the data that was available to them because it was all across separate systems. And now, with data products, with Immuta, creating the right level of visibility, we have really moved together to a self-service analytics environment. And I think for HR, the only way that make it possible is to work together with Databricks and Immuta to achieve that. Mo, I'm going to hand it over to you. And of course, there will be room at the end of the presentations for some more questions or answers if needed.
Yeah, thank you, Roel. I will talk a little bit about more supposed to do. Yeah, I will restate what I just said. So my name is Moritz Pleisnig. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Immuta. I will talk a little bit about Immuta and all the things we are doing. But before I do that, I want to actually take a step back because when you are at a conference like this one, right, there are so many announcements. I think you can hear it in my voice. I was like talking for the last 3 days, I think from like very early in the morning until very late at night because there are so many exciting things happening. We had many conversations with customers. There were the keynotes, not just one keynote, right, multiple keynotes. And I think when you see all the announcements, and not just Databricks announcing new capabilities, but then a lot of other vendors and partners announcing new capabilities, I feel like it's sometimes a little bit hard to really see where the world is going because there's so much going on, right? And so I like to always take a step back and look at, well, what are the big trends that we are seeing based on the conversations we have with customers like Shell, but also other customers, Databricks. And the first big one is that I really believe you no longer need to code to analyze data. I think that's becoming very, very, very clear. And I think that is amazing. What I mean by that is, right, if you go back even just a couple of years, you needed to know how to write SQL or Python, be maybe a software engineer or a data engineer. You really needed like the technical skill set to directly get insights out of data. And what most other people did is, right, if they wanted insights out of data, maybe they could use like a no-code dashboard builder, things like that. But more often than not, they had to create a ticket, they had to go to the data team, ask them to maybe pull some data, analyze it, put together a report. And I think removing this whole barrier is really good for everybody out there, right? Every organization, every company. Because when I look even at Immuta, how we work, right? When I look at maybe an intern or somebody that's fresh out of college, just like getting into the workforce, starting to work at our company, I think it's amazing if they, let's say, work in marketing and they can just directly interact with data, right? They don't need to like go to other people and then wait. They can just work with data directly. And when we look at why that's happening, it's like obviously ChatGPT, Claude, but then when you look at the keynotes from the last 2 days, right, it is also happening obviously with Databricks, right? You can now go to Databricks, there's a conversational interface that works really well. You can just discover data through that. Additionally, to go into your catalog like Colibra in the case of Shell, right? And so what that ultimately allows you to do is you can get insights much faster than before. And what the consequence of that is that everybody is becoming a data consumer. And what I mean by that is that, I mean it like literally, right? Like, of course, all of us have always been leveraging data, right, to make decisions. Like humans have done that for like a very, very long time. What I mean by it is, again, like if there's an executive team, right, if there's like a marketing professional, and again, we see it, like if there's an intern, right, they can just use those new technologies, whether it's ChatGPT or any of the other large language model providers or Databricks, right, to work with data directly, get insights out. And I think again, it's amazing, right? Because they can do their job better. It's not that they're getting replaced. I don't think data engineers or data scientists get replaced, right, by AI. I believe ultimately more people can work with data. And then the people with really specialized knowledge have a lot of other work that they still need to do, right? So I'm really positive when it comes to all those technology changes. But now when you start playing out all those changes that are happening in the world is, I really think you'll see an explosion of identities accessing data. Like that's a big, I guess, tsunami that's like on the horizon that's coming. And when we talk with customers, and I talk to customers every day in large organizations, everybody sees it coming, but it's like still very unclear how it will play out. And the reason why it's coming is, right, when you look at, maybe let's go back like 5 years. When I met large organizations like a couple of years ago, again, when you worked with data, when you needed insights, when you needed a new dashboard, when you needed a report, right, you did a model endpoint, you worked with the data team, right? However that team is called in your organization, you worked with the people that are data scientists, data engineers, highly technical, had all the knowledge to do the work. What we're seeing now is what I talked about before, right? Everybody's becoming a data consumer. Everybody can ultimately go into Databricks, ask questions against the data that's in the lake, which is fantastic. So suddenly you have maybe instead of a couple of thousand people or a couple of hundred people, you have all your employees interacting with data directly. And there's no guard in between anymore, right? No barrier. You can just work with data directly, go into Databricks, ask questions. And to add to what Royal said, right? The future is obviously agentic, right? And I think it's a little bit unclear, right, where the world is going when it comes to AI and AGI, and I think we can debate that. But what's definitely clear is, especially after this week, right, is that every organization is going to leverage agents. I think the only open question is how quickly, and that depends on how regulated, right, is your company, what the culture is, how forward-leaning you are with technology, if you already put the right governance and guardrails in place. So it depends on that, but there's no question that everybody is going to leverage agents. I mean, we're already starting to see that, right? When you look at all the coding assistant tools, when you look at customer support, when you look at how you can now analyze unstructured data, right? There's a lot possible. And so I think the future we are already in, just not in every company and organization, the future we are already in is that you will have employees that all run agents, right? They might trigger an agent that does some analysis based on structured data and then trigger another agent that looks at maybe files that sit in S3 or ADLS or OneLake. And then you have another agent that does some market research, right? Brings it all back, combines it, and then you get a report with insights, right? If that is the future, it will get really, really complex really quickly because instead of having maybe very few people that are in your warehouse or your lake, you suddenly have everybody, and then everybody also has agents on top of that. And it might just sound, well, this is more identities, it's machine users, right? We've done this before, I've seen this movie before. I think so, but there are also big differences, right? So to give one example, I talked with one of our customers, large healthcare company, and for them, agents are unlocking some really interesting possibilities because let's say you have somebody that sits physically in the US, they're analyzing healthcare data from German patients, right? The agent might run in Frankfurt, right, in that AWS region. That agent might be able to access all the raw data, see all the PII, but then what the human that looks at the results and the outcome of that analysis does, the human sits in the US and only gets aggregated, right, statistics. And that makes things possible that weren't possible before, which I think is really exciting. But you need to figure out how do you manage that? How do you manage all those identities that suddenly are maybe very short-lived, can do different things, maybe act under a certain purpose this moment, act under a different purpose the next moment. And so what we are seeing in this world is that when it comes to provisioning the access and handling access requests, everything will break down. Because what's already happening today is, right, I think there are two ways how you usually get access to data. Either you have access to it because it's a birthright, you have a certain role in your organization, your data engineer, data scientist, you can access certain data based on who you are, what your job title is, right, what role you play, where you're located. That's one way. The other way is you need access to certain data, maybe through a data marketplace like Royal showed. You request access to data, somebody approves, somebody else approves, and then you get access. But how the provisioning is happening when you go through this ticket-based process is it's usually error-prone, it's slow, it takes a lot of time, and there are a lot of delays, right? Because I might find data in my marketplace or data catalog, and then I need to go into ServiceNow or SailPoint or Jira or whatever ticketing solution you're using, and I need to raise an access request. That access request needs to be reviewed by somebody. And I met a person for coffee at the conference, and she told me that every morning, right, she's a data steward, she reviews for an hour access requests. Like, she gets up and is like just approving, denying. And when I hear that, I'm horrified, because I'm pretty sure she's not enjoying it. It's not like the most favorite time of her day. And I also think for the company, right, if you are just like approving and like, you are not really like looking at the request anymore, right? At some point, you're just like, I'm just going through the motion, right, and I hit approve. And that obviously comes with massive risk for your organization and your company. So how we believe ultimately we can help is we look at the whole process and the whole bureaucracy that is involved with provisioning access to data, and we look at what is between, basically, what stands between like the data assets, the tables, the views, the dashboards, the models on the one hand, and the data consumers on the other hand. And data consumers, as I said, it's not just the data professionals, the data engineers, the data scientists, but everybody in your organization and then agents. And where Immuta ultimately helps is when you look at all the bureaucracy, all the back and forth that's going on in the middle. There's maybe a data use agreement involved, there are data governors involved, data stewards, data custodians. There's lots of back and forth involved that usually goes through a system like ServiceNow. At Immuta, we believe you can streamline all of that and ultimately help you remove the big bottlenecks. Because when we take a step back, one other big trend we are seeing is that everybody's trying to decentralize and federate governance to a certain degree, right? Maybe not fully, right? It's not that you're either fully centralized or fully decentralized. I think everybody's moving towards a little bit being more decentralized, because when you think about access to data, right, it's not like granting access to an application, which is very easy to do. When you think about access to data, it really depends on, well, what is in the data, right? Do we have the right metadata? Is it confidential? Is it sensitive? Is it PI? Is it PHI? And so when you think about data governance and access, you really want the people that are close to the data to make those decisions. So when you think about those access request workflows and the provisioning and the tickets, what you want to have is a system where you can federate into different data domains so that ID or a centralized data governance team is not a bottleneck anymore. Because if you are doing that, well, then it's no surprise you have like an hour every morning, right, where you need to approve. What you want is the person that's maybe in the HR domain or in the marketing domain or in the finance domain or in whatever part of your business, right, however you structure your data domains, you want those people to make the access decisions, not ID, not a centralized team. And that is ultimately where we help with Immuta. Now, to talk about Immuta a little bit more, we're ultimately a data provisioning platform, right? We help you either grant access through birthright policies, and Roel showed some of those, right? How different people in the HR organization, based on like what their role is, what jurisdiction they operate under, what employees they take care of, right? They can see different data. Like, we call that birthright access because you can build those really powerful ABAC policies that use Unity Catalog under the covers, but are much more expressive in what you can do in Immuta. And then the other way is you can funnel those manual access requests through Immuta, right? So maybe not everything can be covered by birthright. Maybe when you access sensitive data, you need to raise an access request, and Immuta can handle that as well. And how we do that, to get a little bit more into the details, is Immuta, as I said, right, leverages Unity Catalog. So we're really tightly integrated with Unity Catalog. We use the underlying Unity Catalog controls. And we are never in the query path, right? So we're not a proxy solution. You don't have data going through Immuta. Your data consumers might not even know that Immuta exists, and that is designed on purpose like that. All right, your data consumers should live in Databricks. They should live in Colibra. They should live in the catalog. They should live in whatever other system you're using, because it's probably not just Databricks, right? There might be Power BI, there might be Tableau, there might be some on-premise systems. Your data consumers keep querying the data in all those different tools, and then Immuta sits in the background and helps provision the access, and we are basically invisible to the data consumer. But what I can see is maybe different than what Roel can see, or what all of you can see based on who we are and what access was provisioned for us. And so Immuta is never in the query path, and no data goes through Immuta. And then how you can build those policies is through a very simple plain English policy builder. There's obviously also a Copilot, so you can write a prompt that will generate a policy. But this plain English policy builder makes it ultimately very easy to wrap your head around, well, what access did we grant? Because when it comes to access management, granting access is just the first step, right? You need to manage the whole life cycle of that access grant, because I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with access recertifications, and maybe quarterly or twice a year or once a year, you need to recertify. Do all my employees, all the people that work for me, still need certain access, right? So it's about the whole life cycle, and Immuta can manage the whole life cycle for you. So it's not only about granting access, but also revoking access if somebody is not using the data. And that ultimately allows you to only grant the access that you need. So you're granting very, I would say in a very targeted way through those ABAC policies. Somebody only needs access to a specific table, or maybe only 3 columns in the table. You can grant that access with Immuta. When you don't need it, you take it away. Again, very, very easily, and Immuta can automate pretty much most of that. And so that is ultimately, right, when we go back to the graphic I showed before, how we remove that bureaucracy, right? So ultimately, I think what matters is if you have more people working with data directly, you want them to have access to the data they should be able to access the moment they need it. Obviously, safely, securely, it all needs to be governed. You need to adhere to all your rules, the regulations. But if you look at one of your employees, they're working on a really hard problem, they want to leverage data to make certain decisions, they need the data in that moment, not like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. I talked to somebody and she told me it takes them half a year to grant access to highly sensitive data, right? That's obviously really bad. You want the people that work with data have access to data when they need it, because then you can move quickly as an organization, and you can ultimately have your employees get the insights they need to do a better job, and you become a data native organization, and then you can really also do AI. So yeah, that is what Immuta does in a nutshell, right? We are a data provisioning platform. We can integrate with a data catalog. We can integrate with a data marketplace. You can build those ABAC birthright policies that ultimately get pushed down into Unity catalog, but then a variety of other systems. Could be Postgres, SQL Server, Oracle, right? What we usually see when we work with large financial services institutions, organizations like Shell, healthcare pharma companies, is everybody uses more than Databricks. Databricks is obviously amazing. We love Databricks, but there's more than just Databricks, right? And so everything I told you about those access requests, workflows, the birthright policies, it works everywhere, right? So you define the policy once, it works in Unity Catalog, it works in Postgres, it works in Snowflake, it works in every system, right, that's out there where your consumers are interacting with data and you have the consistent access layer. Happy to take any questions. You can also ask, obviously, Royal questions about everything he talked about and how Shell uses this to manage their HR data. We also have a booth downstairs. There's a lounge around the corner from the conference where there's like food, coffee, drinks if you need a quiet space. But yeah, I will be around for a little bit. Happy to answer any questions.